They fined me $500 for hunting on my own land. So I bought the land behind their homes, the one they all hiked on, and shut it down for good. What started as a peaceful retirement turned into the most satisfying revenge I've ever pulled off. I moved to Pinecrest Ridge for one reason: peace. After 23 years working as a systems engineer in Denver, I was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that seeps into your bones. Waking up at 4:45 a.m., spending 12 hours in front of monitors, answering calls from panicked clients because their servers were down, it wears on you. By the time I turned 51, I realized that the life I'd built wasn't a life I wanted anymore. So I cashed out. I sold the house in Aurora, took early retirement, and moved 2 hours west into the Rockies. I bought a modest log cabin at the edge of Pinecrest Ridge, a community of roughly 70 homes scattered along winding mountain roads. It sat on a 3-acre plot that backed into a stretch of dense, forested hills. No streetlights, no sidewalks, just pine trees, wildlife, and silence. It was perfect. I spent my first few months getting back in touch with things I hadn't made time for in years. I hiked, I fished, I built furniture in my garage. And most importantly, I hunted, nothing extreme or excessive, just bow hunting, the way my father taught me. White-tailed deer in the fall, wild turkeys in the spring. My father believed hunting was a way to become part of the ecosystem, not just a consumer of it. I share that belief. I even built a tree stand behind my cabin, nestled between 2 aspen trees about 15 feet up. Every Saturday morning at sunrise, I'd make a pot of strong coffee, gather my gear, and head into the woods before the town woke up. It was my quiet ritual. And for a while, nobody bothered me. Then came the letter. It arrived in a white envelope with the Pinecrest Ridge Homeowners Association logo printed in gold at the top. I remember standing at my mailbox, squinting in the morning sun as I read the letter. Dear Mr. Harrison, it has come to our attention that you have been engaging in hunting activities within the Pinecrest Ridge residential boundaries. As per Section 8, Clause B of the Pinecrest Ridge Covenant Agreement, the discharge of weapons, including bows, crossbows, firearms, or any projectile-based device, is strictly prohibited. This notice serves as a formal warning. Continued violation of HOA rules may result in escalating fines and legal action. Sincerely, Cynthia Keller, President, Pinecrest Ridge HOA. My first reaction? Confusion. I wasn't within the residential boundary when I hunted. I was on my land behind my property line, over 200 yards from the nearest home. My tree stand didn't even face the neighborhood. It faced the open forest. I wasn't making noise. I wasn't leaving remains. I wasn't disturbing a soul. So I figured there had to be a mistake. That afternoon, I drove down to the HOA office, which was actually just a converted bedroom in Cynthia Keller's oversized ranch house, and rang the bell. She opened the door wearing a lavender turtleneck, high-waisted khakis, and a look that suggested she'd been waiting for me. "Oh, Mr. Harrison," she said, as if mildly inconvenienced. "I assumed you'd stop by." "I got your letter," I replied calmly. "I think there's a misunderstanding." She didn't invite me in. Instead, she stepped onto the porch and crossed her arms. The rule is clear: no hunting within community bounds. With respect, I said, "I'm not hunting within bounds. I'm hunting on my private property. I'm more than compliant with Colorado wildlife laws." "You're disturbing the environment," she snapped. "We're a family-friendly neighborhood. People hike those woods. Children play outside. It's about safety and image." Now, I've had my share of bureaucratic conversations over the years, but something about the way she said image really grated on me. It wasn't about safety. It was about control. "But there's no signage," I pointed out. "No designated trails in that area. That forest is unclaimed. I have every legal right." She shook her head with a tight, polished smile. "This isn't about what's legal, Mr. Harrison. It's about what's appropriate. Your behavior reflects on all of us." At that moment, I realized something important. Cynthia Keller didn't care about reason, law, or property lines. She cared about being obeyed. 2 weeks later, I received another letter. This time, it wasn't a warning. It was a fine, $500, due immediately. I considered fighting it. I even called the county to ask whether the HOA had jurisdiction over wildlife activities on privately owned wooded land. Legally, they didn't, but HOA covenants were a gray area, and challenging them meant going to court. That meant time, money, and stress. I paid the fine, but that didn't mean I was done. The next Saturday, I hunted again, carefully, quietly. I saw 2 does but didn't take a shot. I wasn't hunting out of spite. I still respected the process. But I refused to be bullied out of my own land. By the following month, I received another fine, this one for $250, along with a final warning. That night, I sat on my porch under a full moon, listening to the wind rattle the dry leaves. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not stress, not frustration. Resolve. If Cynthia and her HOA wanted to play games with territory and rules, then maybe it was time I played too. And unlike her, I understood leverage. I started thinking. There was a large patch of forest on the west side of the neighborhood, about 40 acres, unoccupied and mostly wild. I had noticed families hiking back there in the fall, kids on bikes, seniors walking their dogs. I had assumed it was county-owned. But the more I thought about it, the more I remembered something odd. There were no official trail signs. No city maintenance, no trash bins, no county markers. I went inside and booted up my laptop. A quick trip to the Jefferson County Assessor's Office website let me pull up the GIS maps and property records. And sure enough, it wasn't public land. Lot hashtag 47A. Privately owned, unzoned, not developed. Just sitting there, waiting. I cross-referenced the owner. A man named Edgar Gilmore, listed with a P.O. box in Flagstaff, Arizona. I got his number from a public database. Called him the next morning. Hi there, Mr. Gilmore. My name is Jack Harrison. I live in Pinecrest Ridge, Colorado. I believe you own a piece of land out here. I was wondering if you'd be interested in selling. There was a pause, then a chuckle. You're the first person to ask me about that in 20 years. You want it for development or something. No, sir, I replied, just personal use. Preservation, maybe some hunting. I'm retired. Well, he said slowly, I've got no plans for it. Taxes are a nuisance. If the price is right, I'd be happy to hand it off. We settled on $36,000. Clean title. No back taxes. No issues. The transaction took less than 2 weeks. I now own the land that half the neighborhood used as their favorite hiking trail, and I had no intention of sharing. But I also wasn't done yet, because revenge in its purest form isn't just about making a statement. It's about timing. So I waited. I let them hike. I let them walk their dogs, sip their coffee, and take photos of wildflowers. I even waved to a couple of them as they crossed into my new property, unaware of what I now owned. I was patient, calm, civil, until the perfect moment arrived. I've never been one to hold a grudge for long. But what happened with the HOA wasn't just petty, it was personal. They fined me for doing something entirely legal, something I loved, on land I legally owned. All because it didn't fit their neat little idea of what the neighborhood should look like. They didn't talk to me like a neighbor. They talked to me like I was an employee breaking policy. That's when I realized people like Cynthia don't respond to logic or reason. They respond to power. And now, thanks to a stroke of pure luck or fate, I had some. Lot hashtag 47A. 40 acres of raw, untouched forest right behind Pinecrest Ridge. To the average eye, it looked like public parkland. It had winding footpaths, clearings where people picnicked, natural boulders where kids climbed, and teenagers smoked things they weren't supposed to. Families used it. Hikers used it. Joggers, dog walkers, the HOA members themselves. But what none of them realized was that they had no right to be there. Not legally. It wasn't part of Pinecrest Ridge. It wasn't part of any county or state park. It was just a forgotten tract of forest owned by an old man in Arizona who hadn't seen it since the late 1990s. And now I owned it. I finalized the paperwork over phone. The county clerk recorded the sale. I received the deed in a thick white envelope stamped, official copy. I held it in my hands and smiled. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a loaded cannon, aimed directly at the HOA's front door. But like any good strategist, I knew not to fire too early. First, I had to make sure everything was airtight. I contacted a local land surveyor to walk the boundaries with me and verify the lines. I paid him $1,500 to place official boundary markers and flag the corners. I also had him draft a topographic map for my records. I then called a lawyer, Gretchen Alvarez, a sharp, no-nonsense property attorney recommended by my hunting buddy Rick. After reviewing the deed and county codes, Gretchen confirmed what I'd already suspected. Jack, they've got no easement, no lease, no zoning control over that land. The HOA can't touch it, she said, flipping to the pages of the document in her office. If they try to challenge you, they'll lose. And if they step foot on your land after being notified, that's trespassing. Music to my ears. You thinking about building on it? She asked casually. No, I said, smiling. Just thinking about putting up a fence and letting the silence do the talking. Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly prepared. I ordered no trespassing signs in bulk, bold, reflective lettering with red borders. I also ordered a few customized signs. Private property, access prohibited. Violators will be prosecuted. I even laminated copies of the deed and put them in waterproof display cases I could hang at the trail entrance. Then came the fun part, watching them hike. I'd take my coffee out to the edge of my yard, just far enough to see the trailhead where my land began. Nearly every morning, there were people strolling through it, waving to each other, chatting with walking sticks and water bottles. Sometimes they wore HOA-branded hats and shirts, like it was their land, their territory. They had no idea the forest they loved belonged to man. They'd just tried to railroad with fines and warnings. I felt a strange sense of giddy anticipation, like a fox watching a henhouse full of smug chickens. I waited a full month before I made my move. It was a clear Saturday in early October. Peak foliage, when the aspens and maples lit up the hillsides like fire. There were more people than usual on the trail. I watched a group of teenagers riding mountain bikes along the main path. I watched 2 couples walking their Labradors, and I counted 5 joggers between 7 and 9 a.m. Perfect. That afternoon, I drove my pickup to the base of the trail, backed it in, opened the tailgate, pulled out a box of signs, a posthole digger, and a mallet. Within 2 hours, I had installed 8 signs at key access points. 1 large one at the trailhead, 2 on trees facing the parking area, the rest along the old paths that snaked through my property. I placed a copy of the deed under plastic next to the main sign. Bold letters read, "This land is now privately owned. Entry is not permitted. All access is revoked." As I hammered in the final post, a man in a gray tracksuit came up behind me. "Hey," he called out. "What's going on with the signs?" "Just putting up some boundaries," I said cheerfully. He frowned. "You with the HOA?" "Nope," I replied. "I'm the new landowner." His mouth opened, then closed. "Wait, you own the trail?" "Sure do." He scoffed. "You can't do that. That's public land." I handed him a laminated copy of the deed. "No, it's not. Hasn't been. Just nobody bothered to check." He scanned the paper, then looked up, genuinely rattled. "But everyone uses this trail." "That's the problem," I said, smiling. "Everyone uses it. For free. Without permission. Not anymore." He stormed off, muttering something about lawyers. By Sunday morning, the wildfire had spread. My phone buzzed all day. Voicemails, texts, emails, most from unknown numbers. One neighbor even drove up to my cabin and knocked on the door. "Hi there," she said sweetly. "I'm Judy from the neighborhood committee. I just want to talk about the signs you put up. There's been some confusion." "No confusion," I replied, not even open the screen door. "That land's mine now. The signs stay." But it's been a trail for years, she insisted. Can't we work something out? You didn't work anything out with me when you fined me for hunting. I said calmly, I'm just applying the same principle. Rules are rules. She blinked. It's not the same thing. It is to me, I said, then nodded. Have a nice day. I closed the door and let her stew. On Monday, the HOA fired its first official salvo. A letter arrived, certified mail this time. It was filled with legal jargon. Historic community access, easement by prescription, public reliance. I handed it to Gretchen. She laughed after 3 pages. They're bluffing, she said. You bought it legally. They've got no standing. No recorded easements. No official use permits. If they want to push it, you can sue for damages. Good, I said. Let's keep everything documented. That week, I installed trail cameras, posted notices of monitoring. I hired a local security company to do weekend patrols. The HOA held a special emergency meeting, which they streamed on Zoom. I watched anonymously. Cynthia's face was flushed with barely concealed rage. We are currently exploring all options to restore access to our beloved nature loop, she said. This kind of behavior is detrimental to community trust. We believe we have legal rights. Someone unmuted and asked, why didn't the HOA buy that land years ago if we use it so much? Silence. Another asked, can we pay him to open it back up? Cynthia hesitated. That's not the approach we want to encourage. I closed the stream and laughed. By Friday, they launched a petition. 12 homes signed. Some tried guilt. Others offered to negotiate a monthly access fee. My response was simple. Access is not for sale. Property is not a community gift. Hunting season starts next week. Do not enter. I printed it, framed it, nailed it to the old hiking gate. That night, under a sky full of stars, I sat on my porch with a glass of bourbon and watched the pair of us stroll across my now 43-acre property. For the first time in weeks, I felt peace again. They thought they were in charge. They thought rules only applied to others. They didn't realize they'd picked a fight with someone who didn't bluff. The Saturday after I shut down the trail, I woke up early. The sky was pink with dawn. Birds chirped like nothing had changed. But Pinecrest Ridge was buzzing beneath the surface like a kicked hornet's nest. By now, every resident knew the truth. Their favorite hiking trail, their morning dog path, their so-called nature loop, was mine. And I had closed it permanently. I stepped outside with a mug of black coffee and breathed in the mountain air, clean and sharp with the scent of pine needles. From my porch, I could just make out the ridgeline of my newly acquired land. It was quiet, almost too quiet. Then came the knock. Not a casual neighborly knock. This was 3 hard raps, urgent, entitled. I opened the door to find Cynthia Keller standing there in a pastel blue blazer and tennis shoes. Her hair was pulled tight, her eyes sharper than I'd ever seen. She didn't even say hello. You need to take the signs down, Jack, she said, stepping forward like she owned my doorstep. This has gone far enough. I stared at her for a moment. Good morning to you, too. I'm serious, she snapped. This is causing an uproar. You're being spiteful. I took a sip of my coffee. I'm protecting my property. She scoffed. You only bought that land to punish the HOA. I smiled. And yet here we are. Her face twitched. This isn't about you. It's about the community. People rely on that land. Children play there. Seniors walk their dogs. It's a vital part of our neighborhood. Then maybe the community should have thought of that before slapping me with fines for hunting on my own land. That's different, she said instantly. No, I replied. It's exactly the same. I followed the rules. You didn't like it. Now the shoe's on the other foot. She inhaled sharply. You're destroying years of harmony. No, Cynthia, I said. You did that the moment you decided the rules didn't apply to me. I'm just giving you a reminder of what they feel like when they do. She opened her mouth to argue, but realized it would be useless. Instead, she turned around and marched off my porch without another word. I stood there a moment longer, sipping coffee, listening to the sound of her footsteps crunching away on my gravel drive. That was the first sign of the meltdown. The second came the following day, a full-blown HOA email blast to all Pinecrest Ridge residents. Subject, urgent, unauthorized trail closure. Dear residents, as many of you are now aware, the previously accessible forest trail behind Lot 12 has been unilaterally closed by its new owner, Mr. Jack Harrison. While Mr. Harrison has legally purchased the property, the HOA believes his actions are detrimental to our community's cohesion, health, and spirit. We strongly encourage all residents to sign the attached petition demanding a legal challenge and the reinstatement of public access. HOA Board, President, Cynthia Keller. They attached a trail use impact statement, a list of 72 names, some of which were kids, and a vague threat to pursue legal options. I wasn't worried. 2 days later, a trail reclamation rally was organized. They put up flyers around the neighborhood, printed shirts, posted in local Facebook groups. Come Saturday morning, I walked out to the edge of my new property line and waited. And sure enough, by 10 a.m., a small but loud crowd had gathered near the trailhead. There were about 30 people. Dog owners, joggers, a few middle-aged cyclists, and several angry retirees who looked like they hadn't hiked in years. They held up signs. Reopen our trails. Nature belongs to everyone. Stop the land grab. I had posted 2 large security guards near the entry gate, wearing jackets with private property, and no access stitched across the back. When the first protester tried to cross, one of the guards calmly stepped in front of her and said, "You are not permitted to enter. Please step back." The woman, mid-50s, yoga mat slung over her shoulder, glared like she'd been slapped. "I've walked this trail for 20 years, she yelled. "Then maybe you should have bought it," I muttered under my breath. A few brave souls tried pushing past. That's when the guards called the sheriff. A deputy showed up within 15 minutes. "Good morning," he said to me as we stood by the trail entrance. "Morning, officer," I said. "You the landowner?" "Yep, deeds on the sign. I've got a copy here, too." He took a look, flipped through the papers, and nodded. "You're well within your rights." One protester shouted, "But it's our neighborhood trail." The officer shrugged. "It's not anymore." With that, the rally fizzled. The signs went down. People scattered. And I stood there, sipping lemonade and pretending not to grin. But the HOA wasn't done. 2 days later, I received an official community grievance package from their attorney. A thick folder with tabs, maps, and a lengthy claim about easement by prescription. A legal concept that said, if someone used land openly and continuously for long enough time, they might gain access rights. I sent it to Gretchen. She called me laughing. "Jack, they're grasping at straws. Even if they had a claim, which they don't, they have to prove 20 years of uninterrupted, exclusive public use, without permission. That land was always private, just neglected. So we're safe. Like Fort Knox," she said. "I wasn't just winning, I was untouchable. But I wasn't satisfied yet. That same week, I put up a chain-link gate with a combination lock across the main trail entrance. No one was getting in now. I added motion sensor lights for night visibility and another dozen warning signs along the boundary. And I wasn't even close to done. The HOA held an emergency town hall. Cynthia looked like she hadn't slept in a week. I sat in the back row in a flannel shirt and jeans, arms crossed, saying nothing. One neighbor asked, "Can't we just ask Jack to open it during the holidays or weekends?" Cynthia snapped, "We don't negotiate with bullies." Another said, "Honestly, I don't blame him. We were kind of harsh." A third muttered, "I heard he got fined for just bow hunting. That's ridiculous." The crowd murmured. Cracks were showing. Support was fading. Cynthia knew it, too. Her voice shook as she ended the meeting with a forced smile. "Let's stay unified, neighbors. We'll find a way through this." But she wouldn't, because the community had turned, and she had underestimated the quiet guy with the cabin in the woods. That night, I got an anonymous note in my mailbox. "Not everyone supports the HOA. Respect for standing your ground. Lot 18. It wasn't just about property anymore. It was a reckoning, a shift in power. For years, Cynthia and the HOA had ruled by appearances and intimidation. But now they had finally picked a fight with someone who couldn't be pressured, threatened, or guilted into submission. And the more they pushed, the more ridiculous they looked. The local paper even ran a small headline: "Hiker access cut off after HOA. Dispute backfires." I framed it, hung it in my workshop. By month's end, the trail was forgotten, overgrown, silent again, just the way I liked it. I went hunting again the following weekend, this time deeper into my new land. I sat in a tree stand under the amber leaves, listening to the wind pass through branches. I didn't see a deer that morning, but I didn't care. I was at peace, and that peace had been earned. The HOA had tried to break me with paper fines, threats, and social pressure. Instead, they'd handed me the blueprint for total victory, and I had followed it to the letter. In March, they tried a new tactic. A real estate agent from the board called me up. "We're wondering if you consider selling the land to the HOA. We're prepared to make an offer above market value." I told her, "Sure, I'll sell it for $500,000. Silence. Then laughter. "You're not serious." "Oh, I'm very serious. That's what your control costs." The HOA couldn't afford it, of course. They offered $50,000, then $75,000. I rejected every bid. So they started offering me perks: free landscaping, free snow removal, waived HOA fees for life. I declined. I'd already posted a notice that the land was being turned into a private wildlife sanctuary and hunting preserve. I wouldn't be building anything or clearing trees, but I would be fencing the perimeter and applying for agricultural tax benefits. In April, the fence went up. By May, Cynthia resigned from her position as HOA president. She cited personal reasons and community burnout. I heard from a neighbor that she sold her house 2 months later. Funny how things work out. Now, every morning I sit on my porch with my coffee, watching wild turkeys scratch in the dirt where hikers used to pass through. My land is quiet. My mind is clear. And the HOA, they don't find me anymore.